What's up, everybody? Welcome to our very first Off the Grid.
Yes, I'm excited.
So excited. We continue to go against the grain and keep God first in all that we do. We are just so excited for this, and just thank you guys so much for tuning in. And we hope and pray that you get something out of this.
Yeah.
So do yourself a favor. If you haven't already done so, follow us on Facebook. Okay, and also follow us on YouTube. Where we're going to be exclusively putting this out. So love you guys and just so excited. So let's jump in.
Yeah.
Okay. So today we're going to be talking about in this first gathering that we're having. Are you covered? Are you covered? And we're going to be talking specifically about what is a spiritual covering. And can you be blessed without one?
There's that.
Yeah. So when we think of spiritual coverings, the first thing we think about is a pastor, correct? Is that what you think about?
Yeah.
So I just want to give a quick definition of what a pastor is. Okay. So a pastor is defined as a minister of a church and congregation and an overall spiritual overseer. Here's a couple other bullet points of the duties of a pastor. A pastor is recognized as an under shepherd of God's church.
Right.
Is a man or woman of proven godly character.
Okay.
Teaches sound doctrine and refutes false teaching.
Okay.
Leads and protects God's people.
Good.
Okay. So the first biblical mentioning of a pastor is found in Ephesians 4:11. Okay. And this is where Apostle Paul wrote, and he gave some apostles and some prophets and some evangelists and some pastors and teachers. Right. So that's a historical background of a pastor. So when I say all that, like what jumps out to you? So I done said a whole lot. Spiritual covering, what a pastor is, the duties of a pastor. What kind of jumps out to you when you hear that?
You know, that we have seen and do see this perverted. Mucho lots. So
she going hard in the paint.
I just, fortunately we've been able to, be under some good pastors.
Yes.
We've seen good, but we've also seen, experienced, and heard about not so great. And these not so greats, it really does cloud people's idea of what church is, this covering idea, and it just gets real messy, real fast, especially just with the things that we're seeing and hearing about today.
Yeah.
And, you mentioned the scripture in Ephesians 4, and what sticks out and what hops out is that pastor is just one of the five. We call them like offices, but it's one of the five. We could say lanes. It's one of the 5 lanes that Jesus spoke about giving to the body of Christ.
Spiritual folks say fivefold.
The fivefold ministry, but folk we talking to ain't spiritual. Be like the five. What?
Yeah. For the church
like,
folk,
what
it's
is that?
fivefold.
Is that a meal I could get from Wendy's? Is a 5 like what is happening here?
5 for 5.
5 for 5. Like what is that? So
break it down.
So there's apostles, there's prophets, there's evangelists, there's pastors, there's teachers. So these are these 5 offices, these 5 lanes, and. I think about the fact, like the pastor's not the only one. People hear about that. And I don't know if this is across the board, but I know the experience that I've had in, the black church. We idolize that position right there, and, being a pastor, it's not the best one. It's not the most powerful one. It's not the biggest one. It's not the most important one. It's one of 5. And, part of that perversion or that whole where we've twisted what God really intended to happen when, he said, I'm going to send y'all some pastors and some, part of that is just because we've kind of like twisted that and made it be something that it was never intended to be.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, and when you say perverted, one of the things that I think about is just not taking the position seriously, but also using it for your own arrogant desires. For your own, egotistical, ways of just thinking of like of a person who's narcissistic, in a way, so like. I always think about a pastor that's like lording over you.
True.
trying to basically tell you what to do with your life.
That.
Somebody who's basically saying do it or else. So kind of like a bully. In a lot of different
or
ways.
like you ain't gonna be good with God if you don't do what I say because I'm over you. And it's like, well, what?
Or a doomsday type situation, which is like if you don't do this, bad things are gonna happen. It's like, whoa.
That's a problem.
Like where's this coming from? And I want to give some of you, just some scriptural backing as well. Like nowhere in the scriptures does it say that a pastor lords over your life,
right?
Or is called to be manipulative in any way. There's nowhere in the scriptures with that. In fact, Jesus rebuked this mindset in Matthew chapter 20, verses 25 to 29. You can read it on your own time. But, he said that he was called to serve others.
Yeah.
He was literally brought to this earth not to be served, but to serve others and to give his life for the people that, he came here for. So my question to you is, where did we get this spiritual covering mindset from? Like where did that come from?
I mean, well, for one, like this whole idea is that we are, we're submitted to the authority of someone, of another Christian, another believer. Usually that's a pastor, right? But I mean, technically it could be anyone. It's just like you have someone who is, they're covering you, they're overseeing you, they're taking care of you, they're giving you sound wisdom, like helping you make decisions, like in the good sense, in the light sense of the word. Okay, fine, there's nothing wrong with getting wisdom from someone. There's nothing wrong with having someone to be accountable to. There's nothing wrong with those things. But this whole thing that we're talking about in the body of Christ that we've experienced, this idea of you got to have a covering and all of this, it's twisted because it's like, this thing that we've come up with out of nowhere, because you don't see that word. That's not in the Bible.
Right.
Spiritual. It's not. So it's something that we've come up with. It did come out of a movement called the charismatic movement, where things like giftings and all of that and, what the Holy Spirit does with that was really popular at the time. And so this idea of a spiritual covering came out of that. But it's been it's a whole twisted ideology. It's a whole twisted doctrine.
Yeah.
Like we are accountable to God. Period. Like ain't not that's it. So having someone that you look to as almost like not really a mentor, but someone in that kind of a role, there's nothing wrong with that. But ultimately we have to answer to God for what decisions we make and what we do.
Yeah.
And that's the answer.
No.
Did I answer?
No, that was a good answer.
Okay, because I felt like, wait, did I answer the question?
No, it was a good answer. I think for me, it reminds me of the many times that I, sat under, because, just want to share, we have sat under some amazing pastors. So this isn't a pastor bashing
not at
gathering
all.
that we have at all. But, I've also had experience working with some that weren't the greatest. And I can remember the ones who weren't the greatest were the ones who were constantly trying to manipulate me to submit to their will instead of God's will. And I think that's the thing. And as a young man, I did that because I wasn't spiritually mature enough to realize that, a pastor is somebody who pushes you towards God and not yanks you away from them. So like I can remember times which I know God spoke to me, but when I would say something to the pastor, he'd be like, I don't think he said
that ain't God. And it's like, well, what?
And I'd be like, okay. And as a young man, I'm like, well, tell me why. And, and they know more word than I do. They're older than I am. So they would, boom, boom, boom with the scriptures. And I'd be like, well, wow, I guess he's right.
Maybe I was wrong.
Maybe I was wrong. And I remember in my younger years, there was a lot of things that I missed. Because instead of me submitting to God, I submitted to a man. And I realized as I got older and got mature that it went against what they wanted. So they knew since I was young, they took advantage of me to use the scriptures and all that kind of stuff to basically manipulate me and coerce me into not doing this.
And that's the problem with this idea that we're talking about with this covering thing.
Right.
That's where it gets twisted.
Right. So it's important to make sure that God is leading you first. That's so important. There is no issue with having a pastor.
Right.
Okay. I want to say that again. there is no issue with you having a pastor. I'm going to say it 3 times just in case somebody tunes in. Like, there is no issue with you having a pastor. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay. But they always need to be second to what God is instructing you to do.
That is right.
It doesn't mean you're disrespecting your pastor. It means God should always be number one in your life.
It's true.
So you have to make sure that God is number one.
Yeah.
Okay. And here's the thing. If you have a great pastor who hears from God, it will actually be confirmation on what you should or need to do. So like my thing is, a pastor, when you say something to a pastor, right, that God told you to do something, the first thing a good pastor is going to say is, okay. Like, you heard from God, you believe God's told you this. Okay. How can I support this? Okay. Or if it seems a little off, be like, okay, I hear you. Got some questions. Not saying God didn't say this, but like, how are you going to flesh this out? So like, let's just say God said for you to leave everything, right? You're going to move across country. You're going to quit your great job, leave your great house, whatever. A great pastor is going to be like, okay, let's talk this through. Not saying God didn't tell you to do it, but like, what steps has he prepared for you so that you can have a job? You can have a house to live in. God's not going to just have you quit everything and then you just driving around looking for a job and a house.
Figure out when I get there.
A pastor, somebody's going to help you put the pieces together.
Yeah.
Because they're in tune to what God has told them in regards to helping you. What a not so great pastor is going to do is going to be like, I don't agree with that. Well, why not? Nah, that ain't God. Well, can you tell me why? It's literally like a parent who's like, don't do that. Why not? Because I said so.
Yep.
Well, can you just, okay, I hear you. Can you tell me why I shouldn't do it? Just don't do it. Okay. Like, so my thing is, you have to give me a reason why this isn't good. You have to give me a reason on why this isn't of God. You know, and I think that's where, you know, when you said earlier about perverting that position, a lot of pastors see that because instead of training people to go towards God, they're training people to hear me. Towards
themselves.
As the voice of God. I am the voice of God.
No.
And it's like, no, you're not.
Yep.
Okay? Like, you hear from God, but I hear from God too.
As well.
Because your calling isn't greater than mine.
That is correct.
And I think that's another thing that we struggle with in the church, in which when you're talking about the pastor being, you know, that's just one of the many positions.
Right.
And one of the many callings. We all have different callings, but there's no calling that's greater than the other.
That is very true. That is very true.
So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Well, yeah. And like you said, like, yes. And there's a huge difference between a pastor or a shepherd, as they'll say, like in the Bible, a pastor and God. Like, there's a huge difference there. And sometimes, you know, we get it wrong. So we are all human.
Yeah.
I'm human. Pastors are human. Yeah. We're human.
Yeah.
Sometimes, you know, little mixed motives get mixed up, you know, in what you're trying to tell folk to do.
Yeah.
And it seems the times that we have had those kind of little tense conversations, you know, with leadership, like, this is what we're called to do. And they like, yeah, nah. You know, it's typically been because there was some kind of motive that wanted to keep us where, you know, with them and not, you know, have us rolling out doing it, what it is that God has called us to do. And it's not always easy, you know, to kind of navigate that through. But if it's keeping God's voice as the priority and the number one, you will not be led wrong, period.
Right.
And sometimes I be feeling like, too, like, with God, it's just like, well, Lord, we just gonna knock this. We gonna roll it out. If we get out here and we just butt out, then oh well. At least we said we followed you based on what we believed. You like, you know. It doesn't always have to be like the Lord woke me up at 2 a.m. and there was an angel at my bed, at the foot of my bed. It's not always like that. And a lot of times, you know, it seems like God goes a little silent because he's just like, I'm going to give you the one word.
Yeah.
And you're going to get resistance from leadership. And I'm going to see what you do with that.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's not easy all the time. And when we kind of came off the grid, I remember having a conversation with somebody that we know. And so we weren't members of a church at that time. We're still not members of a particular church. And she was like, yeah, y'all ain't members of a church no more. Well, y'all ain't gonna have no covering. And I was like, girl, what?
Yeah, we got a roof over our head.
It's just like, well, then who is the Lord? And who
What you doing covering?
Did Paul have a covering? Who was Paul's covering? Who was Peter's covering? Like, who was their like, what are we talking about here? But it's this mindset and this idea that unless you are members of an actual church, then the call on your life or what you're trying to do is invalid.
Yeah.
And that is so far from the truth. Like, where there's no, that ain't in there.
No.
That ain't in there at all.
No. No.
That ain't in there. Now, there's nothing wrong with wisdom. We have people that we go to for wisdom. We're not just out here some old renegades like we just about to do this. We just about to do that. There's accountability that we need to have. There's, there are all of those things. But, sometimes when God is calling you to do something different and to break that mold, you will get that resistance and, that covering thing. Be like, yeah, but you ain't going to have your covering. Well, I got Jesus. I'm fine.
Well, and I mean, we have to get out of this one size fits all mindset.
And that is true.
And I think that's where we continue to struggle as, a church, as, Christian base, whatever. It's kind of like if it works for you, great.
Yes.
Because here's the thing about us, we don't make fun of anybody.
No.
Like, my thing is if you see your pastor as the be all end all for what you do, great.
Yep.
But we don't. and that doesn't mean it's disrespectful.
Yeah,
it's that works for you.
Yeah.
That's why we still to this day have Baptist, Pentecostal,
non-denominational,
all that stuff. If that works for you, great. But just because somebody isn't doesn't mean that they're not living right, and doesn't mean that they're not under the authority of God.
Yes, because it's like if you ain't under authority of no pastor,
right?
You ain't under the authority.
And it's like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, and it's just like,
right?
But for a while, I thought that was how it was because that's what we were taught.
Yes,
I thought that was right, but it wasn't until when I was, I think, pregnant with Josh. And remember, we were visiting churches for a long time. Technically, we did not have a covering, so to speak.
For a minute.
But I do remember feeling like something in me, like this little urgency, like, oh, shoot, we can't be out here not being members of no church for too long. Something like the devil going to come get us. And it's just like, what the world? And sometimes when we, after the pandemic and all of that, and we were, not official members of a church, that thing did creep up sometimes. I'd be like, Jay, I would ask you, like, we good?
Yeah,
like, because
we're fine.
I'd be doing a little temperature check with the Lord, like, Lord, look. We need to be up and we gonna have to join something somewhere, and then you start doing stuff and it's not even where God sent you, and then you be mad.
Well, I mean, and I think the pandemic opened up a lot of people's eyes.
Yeah.
And I think it also made people almost lose their minds as well. Yeah. Because if you didn't have a personal relationship with God, you were screwed.
Very true. Very true.
And I know some people who really, really struggle because they didn't have that brick and mortar to
and
go
couldn't
to.
function. Right.
You know what I'm saying? So I think to me, we also have to, and I ain't trying to get deep here, but we also have to think in mind, when the pandemic took place, there was a reason why that took place. That was a resetting of a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And it was also you have a decision to make. Are you in a relationship with things? Are you in a relationship with tradition?
Yeah.
Are you in a relationship with titles? Are you in a relationship with a building? Are you in a relationship with me?
True.
Talking about God.
True.
And I think even for me, it was like, okay, we can't even leave the house.
Yeah, like what you gonna do now?
Right, because this is before, we had the immunization, type stuff going on. It was before you could take needles and all that to do so. So, I mean, I think for me, it was a wake-up call, and which is like, really, choose ye this day who you gonna serve.
It was tight.
And I think... for us, that really helped us grow because my relationship with God grew exponentially.
Yeah, me too.
Because all I had was God. I was about to lose my mind during this pandemic.
I was ready to check out. Like, I ain't got time for this.
My work schedule was done. I mean, I used to travel all the time, and now I'm home, and now I got to do remote learning with these kids.
That Jay.
That's a whole other episode.
Dad. Yo, see that thing still. You see,
Bro, I'm telling you, you know what I'm saying? It's still in me. It's still in me. You know what I'm saying? It's like get triggered.
Remember that time you told me that you told Caleb to write his name,
oh my God,
and all he drew was a line. He was like
on fire.
and you was about to pop off.
It was 30 seconds in, and I told Caleb, I was like, all right, buddy, you just write your name. He's going to like draw a line in the name column.
And he knew how to write, like, bro.
His name. After 30 seconds, I was like, let's take a break.
Yep.
Take a break.
Yeah,
take a break.
that was a mess.
Because I was ready to go on.
Yo, that remote learning.
I had to call on.
You are
on
right.
Jesus.
You are
You know what I'm
right.
saying? And I think that's the main thing is like
You are
have
right.
to make sure that you have, you know, a genuine relationship with God. That is
True.
the most important thing, y'all.
Yeah.
Like God is concerned about you and getting
Yes.
to know you and have a relationship with you. I mean, I'm not saying that he's not saying don't go to church and all that kind of stuff, but if church and all that kind of stuff is before him, God isn't pleased.
That's the problem. Now, right, because church and all of those things, having pastors and all this stuff, that can help to foster your
Yes,
relationship
it
with
grows.
it. Because, you know, you know, but it's just like having our priorities in order
Yes.
and not letting, you know, just anybody come up and try to shame us in or out of the will of God because it's like, but you ain't got no covering or
Right.
I am your covering. So you need to do X, Y, and Z.
Right.
And it's like, well, wait, what?
Yeah.
Just, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, this isn't, you know, an episode of Power in which somebody's telling you to do somewhere else. Like that can't be that can't be what you know,
That can't be how this works.
Position is. You know what I'm saying?
That can't be how this works.
You know what I'm saying? When they be giving you ultimatums,
You better do this.
you better do this or,
Or else.
your whole business gone by tomorrow. Like, nah, man. Like
That
you know,
doomsday
that
stuff.
Doomsday stuff.
Nah,
you know?
nah,
You know, so to close this thing out, because you know we want to be efficient with everybody's time, and thanks once again for all of you guys watching us.
Yes.
You know, so here's 3 closing points that we want to leave you with. Okay. Number 1, and feel free to jump in if need be. A pastor does not own you or your life. God does, as He is the creator of all things.
Yeah.
Okay, that's number 1. Number 2, a great pastor will always have a servant mindset. They aren't asking for Cash App donations for their birthday. Okay, if they are serving, if you are serving a church that's under the poverty line, or you're serving a church that you know, what have you, you know, if somebody wants to bless your Cash App, they will. But please do not be putting your Cash App. That gets under my skin.
That is your thing.
Oh my gosh,
you keep
bro.
bringing that up any chance
Because there's a
like,
lot
did
of-
you see this?
Yo, there's a lot of people, and I'm not just talking about pastors. There's a lot of people in the Christian,
just period.
you know, faith that are multimillionaires, multimillionaires, and when it's their birthday, they put a Cash App, and it's like, you got money,
Mindful.
yeah.
Oh.
And I just think when people do that, it just always reminds me
Like
of
you
like,
got a little cup.
yeah,
like, change.
or arrogance, and which is like, it's my birthday, give me something.
That's true too.
Where my gift, man? So whenever I see that, it's kind of like, yeah, thanks for happy birthday. Where's my gift?
You got
It's
this.
like, if people want to bless you, go ahead and give it to them. But
Yeah.
like, yeah, but my whole point is they're not trying to get something out of you other
True.
than the best relationship that you can have with God.
There.
Right?
That's
That's what a pastor's here for.
Yes.
You know, and like, to piggyback on that, a great pastor will push you towards God.
Yeah.
And not away from Him.
Yeah.
To serve their egos.
Yeah.
Right? If this does happen, go to another morally pure worship community. Okay, get out.
Run.
'Cause
Run.
That's stuff.
Run, because if you're feeling like you're being manipulated
Yeah.
in any type of way, that is not a genuine person who wants to cultivate you and grow you in God, you know, and push you towards Him. You know, and I think that's the key thing. If you don't get anything else out of that,
Yeah.
right? Those are the 3 key things that we want to share with you that hopefully will help you and encourage you and be a blessing to you.
Yeah.
You know,
That's good.
anything you want to add?
No, I think you kind of.
I did it. I
You
did it.
kind of do.
did it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
okay.
little bullet points. They're
Awesome.
good. They're good.
Well, look, we appreciate you guys for joining us for this first Off the Grid. Hopefully, this whole flavor, you got a lot out of it. It's efficient, and this is what we're going to be doing. Okay, every time that we come on. So, you know, once again, we thank you guys for your support. Special thanks to our producer, Mr. Antoine McGee,
Yes.
doing his thing. You know, and we love you guys. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day. We love you guys.
Peace.